Module 2, Building Background Knowledge. What are animal defense mechanisms? Unit 1, Lesson 2. Big question, what are animal defense mechanisms? The word defense means to protect yourself or keep something or someone from getting hurt. The word mechanism means a natural reaction in response to something. So a defense mechanism means how animals react to protect themselves from harm. Guiding questions. How do animals' bodies and behaviors help them survive? How can a writer use knowledge from their research to inform and entertain? Let's take a closer look at the first question. What does survive mean? You've probably heard this word, and based on how I've used it throughout this video, you can probably tell that that means to survive means to live or to keep on living. And the other part of that question, which is their bodies and their behaviors, what I want you to think about is that their bodies are how they physically look and how their bodies are actually made. And the behaviors are how they act. And so if you think about, your body and, what you have 2 arms, 2 legs, but then your behavior is how you walk around or how you look at things and how you react to things. And so the question is, how do animals, both their bodies and the things that they do, their behaviors, help them survive? Now taking a look at the second question a little closer, it's how can a writer use knowledge from their research to inform and entertain? So first of all, what does it mean to inform? Well, you probably noticed that that's the base of the word information. So to inform means to give somebody information. And what does it mean to entertain? Well, to entertain means to give somebody something that they enjoy doing. Okay, so you might use something from this information. You might find it both informative and you might find it really interesting and entertaining. And then finally, the last question I have for you is, what is research? And research is what the information that you gather from all the books and that you read or the websites that you look at, all that information you gather is called your research. And so the question for this module is, how can a writer use knowledge from their research to both inform and entertain? Because that's going to be part of your performance task. Learning targets. I can explain what it means to be a researcher. I can paraphrase information presented in a read-aloud on animal defense mechanisms. I can infer about a text by examining the visuals. What does it mean to paraphrase? Paraphrasing information means explaining something you've read or heard in your own words. So you're taking words out of the text, thinking about what they mean, and putting them in your own words. And for the last learning target, I can infer about a text by examining its visuals. The word visual is something that you can see, like a picture or a drawing. So right now you're going to be beginning the research process, and you might be wondering, what does it mean to research? And research really just means to gather information together, information that you would find interesting, information that you think is going to be important to remember. Any information about animals and specifically animal defense mechanisms, that's what you'll be researching in Unit 1. Performance task. After researching informational texts on animal defenses, you'll be creating a choose-your-own-adventure book about your chosen animal. And this is at the very end of the module. This is what you'll be doing. You're going to write an introduction that describes your animal's physical characteristics, so what they look like, their habitat, their predators, their defense mechanisms. Then you're going to write a little story where your animal is your main character. You'll give it a name, and you'll describe how a predator encounters it. And then your animal has 2 choices to survive. They're going to choose one of their defense mechanisms in one ending, and then you'll write a second ending that will show if they chose to use their other defense mechanism. So you're going to use details and examples from your research that you gather in Units 1 and 2, and you're going to develop that story. You're going to use lots of science words and important things that you learn throughout this to help you write that story. Unit 1, the unit that you're in right now, is the research of animal defense mechanisms. And in this unit, you will learn about general animal defense mechanisms, but you're going to do a deeper study of the defense mechanisms of the millipede. Remember that the millipede, you saw that on a poster yesterday in lesson 1. So you're going to learn more about their defense mechanisms in this unit, and then in general, a lot of different animal defense mechanisms. So you're really building your research in Unit 1. In Unit 2, which is titled Research and Write, Build Expertise on a Selected Animal, you'll actually be researching one type of animal. You get to choose, or your teacher helps you choose which group you're going to be in. And each group is going to be studying a different animal. And that animal is going to end up being the main character of your Choose Your Own Adventure narrative. So before you can write that, though, you need to do research about your animal. And you need to write an informational piece about that animal and how it uses its defense mechanisms. And so that's what this unit is really focused on, a lot of writing and a lot of research about your selected animal. And finally, in the last unit, Unit 3, you'll be writing a narrative. In this unit, you will read and examine a Choose Your Own Adventure story to learn about the format. And then you're going to plan and write your own narrative using the animal that you've been researching in Unit 2. That animal is going to be your main character. And your main character, you'll give it a name, you'll give it, it'll be in its habitat, and a predator will come along, and then you'll kind of be able to tell the story about what happens and how it chooses to defend itself. So this last unit is actually quite a lot of fun, and you get to really write your own story, so it's something to really look forward to. Okay, now it is time to do our read aloud. You'll be paraphrasing the read aloud, so you must be listening carefully and doing your best work. Make sure you have your purple workbook open to the page you see on the screen. At the top, it'll say Source, Venom, pages 16 through 17 and 19 through 20. You'll be listening closely as I read aloud, and you'll be taking notes in this form. I will be reading out loud from pages 16 and 17. First, you're only listening for the gist. Then, on the second read, we can start filling out the information in your chart. Title: Mary, Mary, quite contrary. How does your garden sting? What is lovelier than a garden? Roses and daisies, they're a feast for the eyes and nose. Tomatoes and peppers, they're a treat for the taste buds. Yes, a garden is a delight for you, and also for things that sting. Be careful. Zipping past your petunias is one of the most dangerous animals in America, one you might see every summer day. It kills more people in the U.S. than any other venomous animal. Yet most of us are happy to see it fly by, because without it, we might not have such lovely petunias at all. What is this bold creature? None other than the honeybee, Apis mellifera. There are different types of bees. Many spread pollen to help our gardens grow. Some, such as carpenter bees or Zlycopia, are solitary. They nest in burrows or holes that the females carve in dead wood. The bees we are most familiar with, bumblebees, Bombus terrestris, and honeybees, live communally. Each colony has a strict social structure. The queen produces eggs. The female workers take care of the hive. They perform tasks such as gathering pollen and nectar, making honey, fighting off intruders, and building and repairing cells out of wax to store food and house the larvae, the young. The males, called drones, don't work at all, nor can they sting. They mate in midair with the queen and die shortly afterwards. Almost all bees are vegetarians. living on nectar and pollen from flowers. They use their venom strictly to protect themselves or their colonies. Oddly enough, some stingless bees, Meliponian, which have no venom at all, are the only meat eaters in this family. They live on carrion, or rotting flesh, and other animal material instead of pollen, and they're nicknamed the vulture bees. The bee's stinger has developed over time from what was called ovipositor, its egg-laying tube. In all but one species, the honeybee's stinger is barbed to hook and remain in the victim and to keep pumping venom. As the bee flies away, the insect's abdomen tears and the bee soon dies. Sometimes its victim dies too, especially if many bees have stung it. When workers near their hive sense danger, the bees give off an alarm pheromone, a chemical signal that they can detect. This alerts all the hive's inhabitants, and they become ready to attack if necessary. If any of them do strike, the glands responsible for producing the alarm pheromone detach along with the stinger and keep giving off the signal to attack. Bee stings are painful for a reason. American entomologist Justin O. Schmidt feels that pain is responsible for the insect's survival. The pain of the sting fools a predator into thinking that the bee has caused more serious damage than it actually has, and thus the victim will avoid it in the future. It's certainly true that although it hurts a lot, the venom from a single sting is not strong enough to kill most animals, including humans, unless you're allergic to the venom. Some sources say that as many as 4 people in 1,000 have systematic reactions to bee stings. When allergic people are stung, they can go into anaphylactic shock. Their whole bodies react so badly that they may stop breathing. To survive, they need an epinephrine shot, followed by a trip to the doctor or emergency room. There are kits with epinephrine syringes available for people with this allergy. The high number of allergic people, plus the fact that bees and humans are common neighbors, explains why these insects are dangerous. So after our first read, we ask ourselves, what is the gist? And in order to find the gist, we say, who or what was the text about? In this case, the text was about bees. And what do we learn about bees? Well, we learn about the defense mechanisms that bees have to help them survive. So the gist, bees use self-defense or defense mechanisms to help them survive. Now I will do the second read. Listen for information about how bees protect themselves. In the second column, we will record how these things help them survive. If we find information that is interesting about the bees, but not necessarily related to how they protect themselves, we'll put them in that bottom box that is just other important or other interesting information about bees. That's where we'll record it, at the bottom of your paper, at the bottom of the chart. So keep that in mind. These boxes are only for how bees protect themselves and how it helps them survive. And then that bottom box in the chart is for other information that we find interesting. Zipping past your petunias is one of the most dangerous animals in America. One you might see every summer day. It kills more people in the U.S. than any other venomous animal. Yet most of us are happy to see it fly by, because without it, we might not have such lovely petunias at all. What is this bold creature? None other than the honeybee, Apis mellifera. There are different types of bees. Many spread pollen to help our gardens grow. Some, such as carpenter bees or Zlycopia, are solitary. They nest in burrows or holes that the females carve in dead wood. The bees we are most familiar with, bumblebees, Bombus terrestris, and honeybees, live communally. Each colony has a strict social structure. The queen produces eggs, the female workers take care of the hive, they perform tasks such as gathering pollen and nectar, making honey, fighting off intruders, and building and repairing cells out of wax to store food and house the larvae, the young. The males, called drones, don't work at all, nor can they sting. They mate in midair with the queen and die shortly afterwards. Almost all bees are vegetarians, living on nectar and pollen from flowers. They use their venom strictly to protect themselves or their colonies. Oddly enough, some stingless bees, Meliponian, which have no venom at all, are the only meat eaters in this family. They live on carrion, or rotting flesh, and other animal material instead of pollen, and they're nicknamed the vulture bees. After hearing this section of the text read again, what notes can we take, and in which box in our note catcher would we put them? As I was listening, I don't know if you heard it, but in the first paragraph, I heard the author say that bees kill more people than any other venomous animal. That was really interesting to me. Now, as I look at the chart, I'm trying to figure out where to put that, though. The first column says examples of how bees and wasps protect themselves, and then how the bees and wasps, how this helps them survive. So I'm thinking, well, the fact that bees kill more people than any other venomous animal sounds like it would be a way they protect themselves, but it doesn't really tell me about their body or their behavior. It just gives me a fact about them. So I'm going to put this in the bottom column, which is just other interesting information. And so that I'm going to put it in the bottom box. Another fact I found really interesting in paragraph 2 was the fact that carpenter bees actually dig holes in old wood to make their nests. So old dead wood, they carve it out and they make a little nest for themselves. But I don't think this quite fits in with our 2 boxes up at the top where they're examples of how they protect themselves or help them survive. I would put this in that bottom box that is other facts about bees and wasps. In that box, you can put anything that you find interesting or something that you want to remember, but you don't think it quite fits in with how their bodies or their behavior help them survive. So put them in that bottom box. Now let's listen to page 17 again. Remember, we are looking for ways bees protect themselves and how it helps them survive. The bee's stinger has developed over time from what was called ovipositor, its egg-laying tube. In all but one species, the honeybee's stinger is barbed to hook and remain in the victim and to keep pumping venom. As the bee flies away, the insect's abdomen tears and the bee soon dies. Sometimes its victim dies too, especially if many bees have stung it. When workers near their hive sense danger, the bees give off an alarm pheromone, a chemical signal that they can detect. This alerts all the hive's inhabitants, and they become ready to attack if necessary. If any of them do strike, the glands responsible for producing the alarm pheromone detach along with the stinger and keep giving off the signal to attack. Bee stings are painful for a reason. American entomologist Justin O. Schmidt feels that pain is responsible for the insect's survival. The pain of the sting fools a predator into thinking that the bee has caused more serious damage than it actually has, and thus the victim will avoid it in the future. It's certainly true that although it hurts a lot, the venom from a single sting is not strong enough to kill most animals, including humans, unless you're allergic to the venom. Some sources say that as many as 4 people in 1,000 have systematic reactions to bee stings. When allergic people are stung, they can go into anaphylactic shock. Their whole bodies react so badly that they may stop breathing. To survive, they need an epinephrine shot, followed by a trip to the doctor or emergency room. There are kits with epinephrine syringes available for people with this allergy. The high number of allergic people, plus the fact that bees and humans are common neighbors, explains why these insects are dangerous. After hearing this section of the text read again, what notes can we take, and in which box in our note catcher would we put them? In the first paragraph on page 17, I heard that bee stingers are actually hooked. And in the text it says it does that so that when the bee stings, it actually, the stinger stays inside of its victim so that the venom can keep being injected into the person or the animal. And so in my chart on how they protect themselves, I'm going to put bee stingers are hooked so they stay inside their victims. And how this helps bees survive would be that when they put their stinger into somebody, even though that bee dies, it might help keep the predator away from the other bees. So survival doesn't just necessarily mean that one bee, it's survival for all the bees. So by having that hooked stinger, the predator, whoever that would be, human or animal, would be would be in pain, so they would stay away from the bees. Then in paragraph 2, we find out that bees produce a chemical signal that tells other bees to attack, and it happens when they're in danger. And this helps them survive because it warns the other bees of danger. So in the first column, we're going to put bees produce a chemical signal, and in the second column, this warns other bees of danger. And then finally, in the third paragraph on page 17, we hear that bee stings are painful. And that's an example of how bees protect themselves. And how it helps them survive, we'll put in the second column. The pain reminds predators to leave bees alone in the future. So again, all of this is for the survival of bees in general, not necessarily the one bee. And so that's what we're going to put in those two columns. Be sure that you've filled this out in your purple workbook. Take the time now to do so. In lesson 3, we will continue filling out this same chart when we read pages 19 and 20 out loud, and that's when we'll learn more about the wasps. So for right now, that second row should be blank for pages 19 through 20, but you have the top the top box is filled out, and you have some facts about bees. You can include more facts that you found interesting in this box as well. End of lesson 2, part 1.